that are just starting to watch it. We were kind of chatting before, and AJ kind of told me, well, let's just start recording. So I was like, here we are. We're already. So yeah. All right, so you have a new book coming out. We both have new books coming out, but you have a new one coming out on the 20th, I think. Is what you said.
April 20th. Do you want to go first? Like, this is, I don't mean to hype this up, but this is going to get into some stuff. Do you want to go? I'm serious. Do you want to go first?
I mean, you got something coming out, so let's promote our new stuff, and then after that we can get into the Giggle game and we can talk about other lighthearted stuff. But if you've got something new coming out, let's talk about that.
So April 20th, which is also the date that coincides with the second Parkland March, is going to be a book that only released in hardcover and digital, called The Book That Shouldn't Exist, and it deals with school shootings.
Okay.
So it deals with just it's probably the most artistic book that I've ever created. But I went and I asked my email list. I'm like, guys, I want to do this. I want to work on this. Like, do you think this is a good idea, or do you think it's crazy? And overwhelmingly, it was like, yes, do it. If you feel the need to talk about this, and talk about it. And I couldn't come up with a story, because there is nothing that, like, I feel like you can't do a traditional children's book in that type of story.
Right.
You can't do like, well, one day, all of Billy's friends died around him. And so what I ended up creating actually never mentions guns, never shows a gun, but it's all the emotional impact surrounding the children that this happens to. Because one thing that I've noticed with Sandy Hook and Columbine and Parkland is that the attention shifts so quickly away from talking about like who this happens to and what the effects are, to like other stuff like video games cause violence and movies, and we need to talk about like bump stocks and crap like that. And we have like for Sandy Hook, we have a generation of kids that they're just now entering junior high and high school.
Yep.
And they are completely messed up for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And so I wanted to talk about that, like not only from their perspective, but also from the perspective of the parents, and how we as adults are kind of like, we're also giving out question marks. We don't know what to do either.
Right.
But somewhere in all of this fight, all of this discussion, there has to be a promise that we will do something. And that's kind of where the book lands. And so it was done very quickly. I had Felix Hinojosa, who was the guy who helped me illustrate Big Science. He did the character designs and the setup sketches, and then I inked and colored it. So very quickly done. A lot of the content or the imagery is inspired by a painter named Mark Rothko. Are you familiar with him?
No, actually, yeah, I don't know that name.
He was a modernist from the 70s that he would do color field paintings. So he would take like 2 or 3 colors and then just glaze them. And he was trying to communicate emotion through colors. And it actually really works. Like there'll be like a red background with a levitating blue box, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's sadness. Like what is going on here? So he's one of my favorite painters, and so the book itself is heavily inspired by that. So I will be donating proceeds from it to the Parkland Fund, and then just kind of just dropping it on the 20th, and then after that moving on to some more fun, lighthearted stuff. But just continue.
Let's just continue. Yeah. I'll try to see if I can cut it out later.
Whatever comes of it may. So yeah, I've talked about this before, the need to go back and forth between writing something that you think your audience will like and writing things that you feel you have to make.
Yep.
And in a perfect world, what you want to make coincides with what your audience wants to read, but that's not always the case. And I do think that artists, authors, like they're kind of put stuff out there a lot of times, and we don't know why.
Right.
If we don't put it out for whatever the universe decides to punish us for it.
Right.
So, but yeah, I do kind of feel like this is, you know, one of the purposes of children's books is to actually agitate, is to actually talk about things that are difficult. And you know, going back to the legacy of like Grimm's fairy tales, where it's, you know, it's warnings or life lessons or harshness. So while I do like, you know, I just put out a book called The Giggle Game that is complete just laugh nonsense. Like this is the exact opposite. So I don't know. Take over from here.
I'm reminded of that movie with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. I don't remember the name of it, but they actually made a joking scene. They talked about, like, you do the safe movie, then you do the art movie, then you do the safe movie, then you do the art movie. I'm almost reminded of that in this situation.
Good Will Hunting? It's not.
I don't think. I think this is one of the Jay and Silent Bob movies, actually. Now that I think about it, there's a scene where the two of the, and that might have been one of the Jay and Silent Bob movies, because they're and I remember this. I know, where Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are arguing. I remember they were arguing about reindeer games or something like that. And but I'll just remember that phrase: you do the safe movie, then you do the art movie, then you do the safe movie. Yeah. So it kind of sounds like, you know, I was just reminded that, you know, you've done a book that you think, you know, specifically for your audience, and then you do a book that you have to do yourself, whether or not anybody's going to read it, whether or not, you know, just you and your mother buys a copy. That's the goal. I use that phrase just like, because like people have asked me about my career and my books, and one of the things I've been doing recently is driving for Lyft. And I'll talk about like my first book, my Kevin and the Seven Lions, because like when I wrote that one, now going on 5 years ago, just speaking of like levels of like expectations and success, I remember, because at the time I taught first grade, I remember thinking, yeah, it'd be great if it took off and made me thousands or millions of dollars. But really the goal was that if I bought a copy and my mother bought a copy and then it looked nice on my classroom shelf, that was the success, you know. But so it went beyond that. And so that was why I considered that first book, you know, a success, you know, kind of situation. You know, that was a book I needed to do. That first book, you know, was not a book that I specifically thought, you know, what would my, because I had no audience. I wrote it for me. And you know, I had none. I had no audience. But I had to trust that if I liked the book, then there would be other people that would like it. And I kind of accidentally kind of discovered that with that first book, to be honest. And so, and for me, my next book is one where I'm thinking like my audience would want, because you know, not to get off on your, you know, to kind of deviate from yours, but that's what, you know, you and I are kind of different places. You're putting out a book that you had to do, and I'm doing a book that I want to do and I enjoyed writing, but I really was kind of like, it came out of what do I think my colleagues would like, what do I think teachers would like, and then what do I think kids would like as well. And so I was using, you know, when I'm putting out Charlotte Morgan and the Great Big Math Problem, it's, you know, it's a new series called The Number Investigators. And so I wrote it as a teacher, you know, my understanding of how to teach math and math thinking, and then how do I make that fun? So there's an example of, you know, writing a book that I think my audience will like. And from what I'm getting back so far, the feedback I'm getting, I was right.
Good.
You know, my editor came back to me and said, this is the best, this is my favorite book of yours so far. And so I was like, I'm on the right track. You know, and I put it out on Steemit, an early version, and got good feedback from there. And so, you know, that's where I'm at right now in the cycle for me, is that I'm putting out something that I enjoy doing, and that I enjoy, you know, that when I write it, I want it to be fun for me, but it is specifically, what do I think teachers would share with their students? What do I think kids would like as well? So I'm kind of specifically thinking, you know, I've never really done that before. I've kind of always written of like, what would I want to read? So I'm kind of approaching it slightly differently with this next release.
I think that's perfectly valid. I only think that it gets too. You only go wrong if you go far in either. If you go too far in either. So if you do something that's so for market that you in this movie, you know, then you've failed as an artist. And if you go the complete opposite direction where everybody can understand it and it's just like so self, you know, the symbolism you can't even translate or parse,
right?
Then you've also very basis is communication. So there has to be kind of a balance that's struck. So the concept 2-day workshop in July, the entire like picture book publishing process, and it goes into the marketing, selling, and creation, that jazz. And one of the things that I want to emphasize to these writers is the art business balance, and you know, looking at things from a business perspective, like what is the budget for the book, how much I need to make back, who's the audience, and also looking at it at the same time from the art standpoint. Does this is want to do, you know, does this express what I need to express? Is this part of? So you really want to hit both,
right?
So like, I mean, the Giggle game, which we talked about, that was very much like for the audience, but it also came from me. Like the book, the selfish aspect of that book was I wanted something that was fun to read to a group,
right?
And it just so happens that something that's fun to read to a group is fun to read for everybody, you know,
right.
But you know, that too, and then pouring myself into the actual creation process with the illustrations, the paper cutout illustrations, and then the next book is Nuts. It's going to be the third book in the Nuts series, which was originally slated for this month, but stuff happened, and that's like, let's just have some fun. I know exactly what the audience wants out of those books, and you know, we'll write.
Yep, you dropped out. Are you back? All right, I hear you now. You cut out after the word right. We'll write.
Yay!
There you are.
I'll write knowing what you expect. So that was.
So when does Nuts 3 come out? That part cut out.
I don't know yet. That probably be the end next month or the early either late May or probably early June. I'd get that out. Yeah, it was originally supposed to come out in April because that's the anniversary of 2 books, but got pushed back. So
yeah. That's the nice thing of what we can move them.
I did a poll with my Facebook readers. Asked, you know, what kind of books are you looking for, and the vast majority came back. They're looking for stuff that deals with issues of anxiety, and there is just like so much anxiety right now in the world that like anything, and that includes a book that's fun, like anything helps. So there's some projects on the back burner that deal with anxiety.
Right.
Once I own can help.
There you go. All right, yeah, you're back again. All right, yeah, because yeah, I like that idea about the anxiety, and I've seen your emails about requesting what do people want to see, you know, books for. I've not responded to them because I wasn't sure how to what to ask or what to say, because you're the first person I've ever first writer I've ever seen on an email ask that. I don't know if you, I don't know, that's just me, so I don't know if any others do it, but you're the first
no,
that I subscribe to that is
actually ask like what people want. That seems kind of weird, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, on the other hand, you know, my experience, that's almost, you know, for me, like I kept writing the Dolben School series because people asked for it. I didn't ask for them, you know, do you want me to write more? It would be like I would put out a Kevin book, and then I'd put something else out, and they'd all go, this is great. We want another Dolphin School book, you know? And so I was like, well, okay. That's kind of how my, you know, my production schedule has worked. I literally have, you know, I haven't put out the first Number Investigators book yet. It'll come out on the 23rd, if not sooner. I've already got the second book behind it written. The third book behind it is 90% finished. And that's because my editor, who's really kind of my first reader, said, you ought to do a series, or the series needs to be a book for every character, you know, because it's the first book I've ever written from the first person point of view. And so that kind of gives it a lot more intimacy, I felt like, and a lot more just relatableness. So I've enjoyed writing it. But after my editor, you know, edited the first book, her recommendation was, you need to write a series because the Number Investigators is a group of 4 kids, and you need to have, you should have a book where every kid is the center of the book. You know, and so since I'm writing first person, every character gets a book based, you know, and then they're telling a story from their point of view. And I was like, that's genius. That's a great idea. And so now all of a sudden I had, you know, a schedule. You know, I've now scheduled the next 3 or 4 books based on that suggestion. I didn't ask for the suggestion, but you know, here's a reader of mine that comes and said, this is what, you know, this is what I'd like to see, and then I end up, you know, doing it, kind of situation. I've never actually gone, you know, to other people and said, you know, what would you like to see? Mostly because I have so many ideas myself about what I want to write. I've got enough, you know, ideas written down or in my head to keep me for, you know, the next several years. For me personally, it's just been, you know, when people talk about my books or they come and talk to me, they'll tell me what they want. In fact, I had somebody on Facebook said, I got my first request for another Kevin book the other day, for the first, because, you know, I hadn't put out a Kevin book in 4 years. But, you know, because fiction is pretty much evergreen, is part of the reason why I like to write fiction. A teacher friend of mine was using the Kevin books in a tutoring situation, and the kid asked for what happens after Kevin 3, you know, so there was my first request for a 4th Kevin book. And so that's kind of how, you know, and if I get enough of those requests, well, then I'll start writing Kevin 4. And as I said before, that was how the Dolphin School series grew. I originally had thought that the first book in the Dolphin School had failed, but then it was more of a slow burn. It kind of gathered steam as months went along, and people kept asking for more and more, and then that series ended up being the thing I sold the most of for a couple of years. In fact, you know, and I get it from like reviews. One of my favorite reviews I have on Amazon is for the 3rd Dolphin School book in England. Somebody had written, it's, you know, they even use the word quid. You know, it's like, it's a great book, you know, it's only a couple of quid and it's a great story. My only complaint is that there's not enough. There's not enough books. There's not enough of them. And so I was like, okay, there we go. And so that's how I end up creating my own writing schedule. When I hear people, we want more of this, you know, that kind of situation.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm in an odd situation because I have, like, I can pull the binder down, and I have near me a binder full of like completed short stories, like stuff that needs to be illustrated, things like that. And you know, I do have a large like library of ideas. The other problem that I have is that every single book and type of book that I put out has its own audience. So I have like a very fractured and also unified audience at the same time. So, you know, I have people that are like, when's the next Monsters book going to come out? When's the next middle grade novel? When's the next Nuts book? And I kind of used to beat myself up for that, but now I'm just kind of like, I guess this is what it is. So
I think that's a good thing, to be honest with you. A week or so ago, I went up to a school up in New Jersey and did a show, did a little presentation there, and I sold, and I brought my books, and I sold books up there. And what I noticed was that as people were shopping, they would be like, "Well, do you have something for the younger kids?" And I'd be like, "Here's baseball and aliens. Here's Kevin." But then when the older kids would come by, they would look at the Dolben schools. And who is it? Dean Wesley Smith. I don't know if you've ever read, followed him. Dean Wesley Smith. He's a very prolific writer. He writes, adult murder mysteries and thrillers and that kind of thing. But if you read, but he talks a lot about the idea. He has a book out called The Magic Bakery, and his thinking is that for writers, the Magic Bakery, each book is a pie. But
I've heard this. Yeah,
exactly. And that's what his argument is. And I think, and his argument is, and what he's saying is that you could have somebody come into your store and they're only looking for older stuff. Well, here's, but then somebody else could be looking for kids stuff. And so that's my store. And I realized, because I've always had people ask me, why am I not in a Scholastic book fair? So, well, I'm not famous enough yet. I don't have an agent. But I realized the other day when I was selling in Jersey that, I almost had my own mini Scholastic book fair. I had my early picture books, I have my second and third grade books, and I have my fourth and fifth grade books. Mm-hmm. And so you're right in that we can have a fractured audience, but I think in some ways that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I have this experience with book fairs where each book fair will have, because they're all over California at this point, and mm-hmm. each book fair has the preferred book. So to give you an example, I have the Bread and Butter series. The Omnibus is the print version of that, and I hadn't sold any copies. I had 5 copies on hand. I hadn't sold any copies for almost a year since that book came out. The last book fair that I did, I sold out. Yeah. Because just for some reason, all the kids kept coming up and wanting that book. Yeah. And I don't know. So there is kind of, because I get asked by a lot of new writers, like, what am I supposed to create? It's just like, I have no idea, actually. I can kind of tell you what's a bad idea, but I can't tell you what's a guaranteed success. Or I just know that the biggest secret to all of this appears to just be to keep producing, to keep making something else, and to keep offering something else. I think with me, it might be a little out of control. I wish I had the picture on hand of what my booth looked like at the last book fair. But there's a fine balance that can be struck at some point.
Well, I mean, and you make a interesting book. Yeah, like for me, I'd be one of the people where I'd want a sequel to your soaked book.
Really?
Yeah, I read that when I went, where's 2? I need 2. Where's it's like,
well, that's getting an audiobook now. I just sent the contract to the voiceover artist.
Is that with also I drew a blank on his name, Joshua? Or is that with the gentleman, or is it with somebody else?
It's with somebody else. Joshua didn't have the right cadence. I sent him to another acquaintance of mine, this guy named Mehmet, that he does audiobooks for children's books with enhanced audio sound. So he's doing one for Monster Ate My Socks, where he added like sound effects of doors creaking and like sock munching and stuff like that. So I sent Joshua along being like, carry on, like tradesmen, in college, there was an art historian teacher that talked about the European tradition of the craftsman's journey. And if you were seeking an apprenticeship, it was customary when you were traveling that people would actually take care of you and lead you towards a master that was seeking an apprentice. Yeah. And we lost that, but I still try to carry it on. Like, okay, man, because it's one of the amazing things about life is that a lot of things open up once you learn to start asking questions. But you can't ask questions until you know exactly what it is that you want. So first question I asked Joshua was like, what do you want out of life? And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, what is your ultimate dream? Like, what do you like, turned out that he actually wants to teach soccer camp. So yeah, I'm like, okay, well, here's some things, like here's some ways of figuring that out.
That's interesting.
Anyway, back on topic. So
yeah.
Soaked is getting an audiobook. I'm hoping to have that out in the fall. I just signed a contract with a company that does video storybooks for a streaming service that will be launching later this year. They bought the rights to the Giggle Game, Little Star, and the Monster Ate My Socks. So I'm just kind of like, okay, here's the life. I understand Sock Monster. Giggle Game, I don't really see. I'm anxious to see how they'll do it. And then Little Star was surprising because that book is only available for the email list. So I don't know. I might have to do a hardcover version of that now since it's getting attention. And then I'm missing something else. Yeah, but I don't know. It's really, I've really been pushing with Ingram Sparks, which is it's another print on demand service, but it actually functions well with bookstores, and pushing out material into the bookstore space, into the print on demand hardcover space. So that's the next step. The next step after that is actually getting in contact with distributors, which is a whole nother animal. Like some of the application processes for distributors, they're like, we would like to have at least 5 promissory notes from librarians on purchase orders. I'm like, what? Wow. Okay.
Well, but you do enough school visits, you could possibly get some from the librarians that you visit with. I don't know how many books, I don't understand like how many books the librarian has to order, but if you've done enough school visits, that's what you could do. The person, maybe not necessarily a teacher, your contact becomes the school librarian.
I feel like there's something I need to be doing every day that involves making phone calls and sending emails that I'm not doing. And I'm just trying to figure out what that it's like.
Well, I actually talked to a librarian about that. I actually went and I spoke back at the school that I taught at last year. I was invited back by the librarian, and she told me that of another writer that I knew here in the area. She got to know him because he literally cold emailed a whole bunch of school librarians, and I was like, why have I not been doing that? That's exactly right. That's a great idea to be called. And you cold email, cold call, you reach out to people to kind of have that happen. For me, I've just been lazy and using the people I already know.
I think I get tied up on what does the email say? Do you just introduce yourself? Do you say buy my book? Do you say like bring me in? I'm not dangerous. Like what?
Not having written one of those, what I would do because I would just say hi. My name's AJ Cosmo. Here are my books. I'm available for school visits.
Write this down.
That would be what I would do. It's just you're not saying buy my books, just saying. Or even say something like, librarians and schools are looking for people to come in and talk about writing. They're looking for people to come in and talk about creativity. When I go in to a school, I come in, I have a standard lesson just because I've gotten good at it and people enjoy it, but I'll come in and I'll talk about how I come up with ideas for writing. Because when I taught 5th grade, or even when I taught 1st grade, what used to drive me nuts would be when the kids would come to be like, Mr. Tiller, I don't have anything to write about. And I had to learn over the years how to mix that in the bud from the beginning. And so I now do a lesson on how you come up with ideas so that you always have something to write about. And so that's my shtick. That's my thing when I go speak at schools now. And so that's what you could do. And so instead of saying, please buy my book, offer like, I'm available to come and speak, and this is what I can speak on, mention a fee possibly, for your day, like a per diem, or even phrase it as a per diem. Or if they don't have the budget for a per diem, ask them to either do like a $50 Skype session or if they can't even do that, ask them if, you know, if they can only do a Skype session, have them, you know, maybe promise to buy a class set of your books or something like that. And I'm getting these ideas from the librarian I talked to, because she, you know, she does enough working with other authors. That's what she was telling me a lot of other authors do, that, you know, I was not charging to go visit schools. I'm going to start doing that now, though. Yeah. Here's what
only take you seriously if you charge them.
Like, yeah, well, two things. Here's what happened to me. I spoke at another school back in, well, I guess February, and I got that connection because the person in the county I went to high school with, the person who's in charge of all the elementary schools, like she's the principal's bosses of all the elementary schools. That's how, you know, that's how high up in the county she is. Her and I went to high school together, and we ran into each other at a book fair thing at Longwood University, and she actually asked me, without making, she goes, "How much do you charge?" And like an idiot, I said, "I'm free." So, you know, and so that made me stop and think, you know, and it was fine for me to do it because I was just trying to get my name out and that kind of thing. But for me, you know, because I'm a licensed teacher, when I spoke at the school and I spoke to I just stayed in the library and kind of did what you and I did up in Northern Virginia a couple of years ago,
yeah.
where I hung out in the library and spoke to different classes. Because I have experience teaching kids and being with kids, you know, I have that ability for classroom management, and I know how to do a lesson. And so it was, you know, it was fine. Everything worked out. But thinking back on it, I was like, you know, charging, and from hearing from other podcasts and other creators, when you charge, it kind of, or when you request a fee, it kind of gives this whole like air of authority, I guess. The other thing, you know, I don't know, that's just kind of my thought. And I ended up not selling any books at the school, and so, and only got like 1 or 2 email subscribers. I mean, I got practice. I got some photographs for you know, promotional and for Facebook, but it made me rethink, you know, the whole like, you know, don't request, you know, do it for free. Let me present for free. Maybe what I can do in the future is just say a per diem, you know, or something, like call it a per diem as opposed to a charge, because that kind of gives you a little bit more air of authority. If you're, you know, if there's money being you know, you've got experience now. You know, you have obviously, well, you do, and you obviously have, you know, you have a lot more titles out than I do, and so you've got that. So you've got that value to do. Charlotte Moore, my next book will be my 10th paperback, so now I'm starting to have, you know, a small amount of titles, but I also have to have
a small amount of titles.
Yeah, I know. I look at like, you and I look at other people and I go, gosh, I got 10. I gotta. You know,
I know, but I'm just crazy, and like, and it does catch up with you. The last school visit that I did, like, I got a whole bunch of questions that I couldn't answer because it was like, so why is Margaret sad? I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I have no idea who Margaret is.
We talk.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's okay. Like, it's okay to take your time. But 10, I mean, whenever you talk to, there are people that I met when I first started out 6 years ago that still only have 1 book and are still hitting that triangle. Like, and I'm sorry, it's a little annoying.
Right. You're exactly right. You know, I've got Charlotte Morgan coming out here in a couple of weeks, but I literally have 1 more fully completed manuscript, another one that's 90%. I have another picture book written, and then I even did a National Novel Writing Month, and I wrote, you know, we try to do the 50,000 words. I think I only made 27. I wrote 27,000 words, and that was more of an experiment. So I have this science fiction novel that's now 27,000 words long, a little bit more adult. It still focuses on kids, but it's a little bit more adult. There's violence. It's my first words where I put 4-letter words in it, and you know, I think I'm gonna kill my first character in that story, but I kind of put it to the side. But, you know, so I have, you know, because for me, is I'm looking at successful people, successful writers, they're prolific. If there's anything that I see that there is consistency among the people that I want to follow, they just write a lot. They produce a lot. I feel like that the people that have one book and hit it big with one book, that's lightning in a bottle. You can't plan that.
Yeah.
But you can plan being prolific. You can control being prolific. And as I've done this more, and especially in the last year since I wasn't in the classroom, I have more time to write. And the more I wrote, the more ideas I had, and I'm sure you notice this too. And so even if I go back to the classroom in the fall, I've had this past year where I've got several books now waiting in the wings to be completed. And so that, that's where I've been. But for me, so when I down myself for saying I've only got 10 titles, I am well aware that that's a silly thing to say, especially when I do these school visits and I pull the books out and I'm like, that's nuts. What have I pulled off? But I kind of feel like, I'm comparing myself to the imaginary thing in my head of what I want, and so that's, I'm just beating myself. I'm just comparing myself to other people, which is never really healthy anyway. Bless you.
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. 10 titles is a lot. And so I'm kind of, it is a lot, but then you're like, but then there are other people, but it's just that inevitable like comparison with what you do.
I mean, as far as like, I think right now what I'm doing, besides the new stuff that's in the works, like I'm going to be re-releasing some of the older books. I had The Hope Flower, which was my second book, and it got lambasted because it uses the word stupid.
I think I have that one. I think I have that one on Kindle.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I got a lot of upset parents that were like, that's a 4-letter word in our house. And I'm like, does your house count? I've become like just completely dark, Martin. I'm sorry. Like I'm like,
that's a good one.
So I think I'm going to re-release that because it seems like a really good time right now to release it. I also had a reader that was like, I can't find this book. Like, what happened to it? And I had a whole conversation with her. So there's going to be re-releases, I think, and just really making availability and putting stuff out there. And the culling is part of this process as well, because like I think you're one of the few people that know a large amount of my titles have been completely pulled.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that's like Disney-like, is like, oh, nobody likes it, put it in the vault. Like, I think I'm finally at the time where I want to start taking some of the stuff out of the vault, because I miss some of the texture of those, like Duckfish, which was just completely stupid, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I really like tried to refine myself and like put myself in this category of like, oh, I'm the silly monster guy and I make this, and then like I just broke that box by sitting on it, and so it's like, okay, we go back to whatever this is. Like, keep going. I don't know. There are no answers, but you're right about the prolific stuff. If you want to do this, if you're serious about this, it's not just a one-off thing. With the exception of if it's kind of, I don't like to use this word, but if it's a vanity book, if it's like one book, you just want to see this made, you don't want to quit your job, you don't have any goals past that, you just want to see this in existence, then yes, like hire people to help you, spend $3,000 on it, get it out there, done. It's fine. But yeah, it's a whole different process if you actually want to make a living of that. And I think that that's actually, if you mentor anybody, that's something that you need to be asking them. And like, what is your ultimate goal? Like going back to Joshua, do you actually want to be a narrator long term, or is this just kind of an interim thing? Because if you want to be a narrator long term, then we have to work on some things like in your acting skills.
Right.
If you don't, then just go here. Like just throw up some auditions on ACX. So that's something I really wish the American education system had down as well, which was like, do you want to be a Bob Ross painter? Do you want to be a Picasso painter? Do you want to teach painting? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a whole huge can of worms there too.
Martin, I am done. I'm just opening cans like left and right. I'm just like bring on the cats and the bass. Like I'm just the cans are opening.
All right. So when did all right. So let's to wrap it up is before we do any more damage here. So your next to our careers. Your next one comes out on the 20th. And it's called what is it? The book that doesn't exist? Is that
the book that should not exist, or the book that shouldn't exist? Yeah. I wonder if I have. Can I do screen sharing real quick? How do I screen share?
Yeah.
Let's. Oh no, we can't show you that. Oh no. Okay, here we go. I'll 1 second.
Yeah, well, show us. I don't think I've even seen a cover on Facebook yet.
No, there hasn't been a cover reveal. Well, the cover was sent through the email.
Okay,
I'll share screen too. So yeah, this is the cover.
Okay.
So very, very different from everything else. Like, let me see if I can pull up the. Just pull up like a sample of it. So the book is just very like artsy kind of minimalism.
That's good.
And because again, like this is difficult to deal with. So it's these kind of pages. Just
that reminds me. I can't. Who's the artist? Leo Liani. I think that's how you pronounce it. That reminds me of some of his early. He's an children's author. That image with the red circle and the words. That was what I was reminded of there.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's. I am expecting some pushback. I don't know. Maybe nothing ever happens the way I expect it to. So maybe nothing will happen and nobody will care. But I think like really the takeaway with my current like life journey and artist journey is to stop being afraid.
Yeah.
And to actually like say and put out what you actually want to say and put out there. Because it is your contribution. And if you don't do it, then your creativity will leave you. You're like, all of this is for naught. So, be true to your voice. And I finally understand why so many writing teachers always harped about that.
Right.
So, because I think when I do group seminars or mentoring and things, the most common note that I give is I don't feel you in this.
Right.
Like I read this and I feel like I'm at arm's length from you. And I think the best writing is the ones where you just like feel like you're inside the other person. So that's yeah. I don't know. I'm rambling. Sorry.
That's a good statement to. Yeah, when I liked writing my next book from the first person because I kind of felt like all of a sudden now, all my other books have been written in the third person, either omniscient point of view or third person limited. But it was different to write from the first person point of view. And writing from a third grade girl's point of view, obviously, the name Charlotte Morgan is a reference to my own daughter. She likes to try to put her in books. Charlotte was a name that we thought about giving my daughter, but so that was where I got that name. And then Morgan is her actual middle name, and so so she's in first grade now. So I wanted to have it done so that by the time she's in third grade and can read it, she'll be able to read it probably here in a couple of months anyway.
Cool.
That she could be able to have a book where she's the kind of the main character, although we're not using her full actual name, but her first name is Rachel, and she actually appears hidden in other books. And so she's and people will catch on to it, and they'll find her. She's actually in when she was younger, I used to have to read my baseball and aliens books a lot to her for for her good night time, because that was there's a character in Baseball and Aliens that gets a hit in his drawn picture. So she'd be like, I'm in a book, and she would tell that at school, and I'm like, not everybody's in a book, sweetie. Let's try to keep that down.
Tone it down.
I came to her class this year and read it, and read Baseball and Aliens, and that was great for her, and a good chance as a dad. But I had reminders like, sweetie, not everybody's in a book.
Well, hey, at least it's not an embarrassment. I mean, that's
not. But she's like very proud of it, and and so I do it because because she enjoys, I'm proud of her, and she enjoys being in it. So it's a gift that I can give to her. And if you know me well enough, you'll find things. If you know me well enough, as you read my work, you'll find stuff hidden in there. They're like Easter eggs for me and my me and my friends. They're like college friends that are hidden in my books. That if they ever, they'll one of the principal in the Dolben School is a friend of mine from college, who actually works in education. So that's kind of one of the nice things about being a writer. You can give people these gifts.
These gifts of of unwanted screen time.
Well, I ask them. Now my daughter 20 years from now might be in therapy because of this, but you never. You don't.
Other things, but not that.
Not that. Yeah. They're preparing her for. We're working on therapy in other areas. Is what we're doing. So so cool. So you have a new book coming out on the 20th. I got one coming out on the. No later than the 23rd is set for order. So if anybody watching this far, we've got something new coming out.
Yay!
So we'll get that done. All right, Mo, here, don't leave yet. I'm going to hang on and stop the broadcast here.
Okay.